Hey everybody, this is Dave here at Blue Bears Games. Today's video is going to be a little different. A few weeks ago, I had a friend and a patron of mine request a specific deck. He wanted to get into Commander. He had no idea what he wanted to play, what he wanted to do, so he gave me a couple of rules and asked me to build him a deck. So I had to come up with my own commander out of nowhere that I think he would be able to play. He is an intermediate player. He is not a beginner, so there could be some combo in here. So after going through all of my stuff, I actually came up with a NIv-Mizzet Parun deck. Now remember, there are some rules here. I had a budget I had to follow, and I had to actually own the cards. So I'm going to go through the deck and show you how to use it. So first, let's start off with the commander. I chose NIv-Mizzet because he is a cheaper end of a commander as far as monetary value, and he combos very well. And I would play a deck like this, so it made sense for me to make a deck like this. It's Izzet colors, so it is red and blue, and he's pretty beefy, so he can survive a lot. So I'll tell you, he is a 3 red and 3 blue commander for a 5/5 flyer that cannot be countered. In Commander, it's important to be able to get your commander out. With him not being able to be countered, he kind of makes that rule easy. His ability is whenever you draw a card, he deals damage to any target. And whenever any player casts an instant or sorcery spell, you draw a card. That's important because he is a combo commander, so you need to be able to get your combo off. So, let me start with the combo. So, the combo is the most obvious one. It is Curiosity. Start off with this. It is an enchantment that says whenever the creature deals damage to an opponent, you may draw a card. So, when you look at the commander, this is your infinite combo. Whenever NIv-Mizzet deals one, or whenever you draw a card, NIv-Mizzet deals a damage to any target. And now with a Curiosity attached to him, whenever he deals damage to an opponent, you may draw a card. So, this is your infinite combo. Now, in Commander, it's good to have redundancy, so I also went with the other option, Ophidian Eye. Ophidian Eye is good because it has flash, so you can go ahead and surprise people at the end of, say, the opponent next to you's turn before you get to go. You can slap this on, start your turn, and your infinite combo can go off without anybody suspecting it. So there's my, that's the infinite combo. So with a little bit of redundancy, it's pretty good to have. Alright, so now we have to also protect the combo. And we have to find the combo. So, Dizzy Spell. The Transmute makes it so that you can go ahead and... the card is not being used for anything but the Transmute, so let's just get that straight. The Transmute says to discard this card for 3, and search your library for a card with the same converted mana cost to this card, reveal it and put it in your hand, then shuffle your library. Same casting cost. So, you use Dizzying Spell to find your Curiosity if you haven't gotten it yet. Now, you can also use it to find other things that cost 1. There are plenty of things in this deck that cost 1, so it's not wasted if you drew the Curiosity first. So, that's how you find at least one part of it. Now you have to protect your commander. Protecting your commander is very important because without him, you don't actually have a way to win. You do technically have a way to win, and I did put some other things in here to help you win, but your main focus on this deck is to get your 2-card combo out. So, the first thing I went with was Mask of Avacyn as an equipment, because even if the creature dies, for some reason, say Wrath effects, because they're abundant in Commander, at least he's not able to be hit with targeted removal, and he gives him a little bit bigger of an ass. He is a 5/5, so having this on him will make him a 6/7. So, it makes it pretty hard to kill the commander. The next one I chose was Swiftwood Boots. It gives him hexproof and haste. More for the hexproof is what this one is for. Haste is okay in case you have to take a different route, and that different route would actually more or less include, say, Whisper Silk Cloak. That's for your beatdown in case you want to if something's going wrong, you haven't drawn your combo. You can use this one, or you can use the boots for a beatdown strategy with your commander, because with these two, Being unblockable, even though NIv-Mizzet has flying, and Commander flying is not really a rarity, it's more the norm. So you can choose a beatdown process, meaning that you can get commander damage in. Because remember, I believe it's 21 damage from your commander as far as combat goes, and your opponent loses 2. So that's how you protect them. That's how you also switch strategies if you need to. Another part of the combo. So, yeah, having Curiosity on NIv-Mizzet basically either lets you draw your entire deck, or it lets you deal as much damage as the cards in your deck. However, you can run out of cards if you're playing against a life gain deck. You could, you have to have another way to do it. And remember, it's a multiplayer format, so you need to be able to deal it to multiple people, and dealing 1 damage at a time is not really sufficient. So if you want to complete the combo correctly, you would want to have a Psychosis Crawler out, because it's whenever you draw a card, each opponent loses life. So not only are you doing 1 with NIv-Mizzet, but Psychosis Crawler is also dealing 1 to everybody. So we start with 40 life. Your hope is that throughout the game, damage has been done to people, and maybe you can just get it with 30 or even 20. So that's another way to go. Now, there's also the ability to just win outright because of your drawing your whole deck. So the first part of that would be a Laboratory Maniac. And remember, those equipments that are in here are so you can protect all the pieces of the combo. So you don't have to just put the Whisper Silk Cloaks or the Mask of Avacyn or the Swiftfoot Boots on NIv-Mizzet. You can put it on the creatures that you need to keep out to make your combo go off and for you to win. So Laboratory Maniac is one of those targets if you need to. He has to stay alive. And then you can literally just not care when anything happens. Once you've got a Curiosity on NIv-Mizzet and you have a Laboratory Maniac out, you just win the game right there and then, because you can just draw your whole deck and win. And that's the important part. Laboratory Maniac says if you draw a card while you have while your library has no cards in it, you win the game. It's not target opponent loses the game or anything like that. It's you win. So with redundancy in effect, I also chose Jace, Wielder of Mysteries. Now, Jace is a little bit better at doing this than Laboratory Maniac. He's very heavy, on the blue, and he's 1 more to cast. However, if you have all the pieces out and you just need the actual win, he's a little bit better than Laboratory Maniac because his uptick, or his +1, says target player puts the top 2 cards of their library into the graveyard, and you don't need anybody to cast anything. You just draw a card, which starts the combo. So that is the actual combo of the deck. Now for the rest of the deck. So I'm going to start off with your ways to get the combo in your hand. The easiest way to go about doing this in Izzet or Red-Blue is you need to draw cards. So I have a lot of cards in here that help you draw cards, so we're going to go over them. So the first one I chose was Opt. It's probably one of the better options in the game, and remember, I have to own these cards to be able to put them in the deck. I do not have certain cards, any extras of, or any at all, so I went with what I had, so keep that in mind. This deck can be upgraded heavily. And that was the point of this. I wanted to make it so that it could be upgraded by the actual player. Because remember, this isn't when I'm keeping this one. I have actually sold off to a customer of mine who is a good friend. So we'll go over these. So Opt, scry 1, draw a card. You'll see a lot of this. This is a cantrip. For those that don't know what a cantrip is, it's basically pay 1 to draw a card. Basically, it just replaces itself. It's kind of like a cycling effect, where you pay 1 just to draw a card, or pay 2 to draw a card. So that's the first one, and there are a lot of these. Peek, which also is helpful because it lets you look at a player's hand. This is in case you're playing against a control player and you need to force something through. You can look to see if you're able to do it. Obsessive Search, again, another cantrip. It's 1 to draw a card, and it has the added bonus of if you're playing against somebody like an Akusar deck, they make you discard it, at least you get to use the card anyway. Thought Scour, we're using this as the cantrip and not as the target player puts the top 2 cards of his library into his or her graveyard. It's more for the cantrip part, but it's a little bonus to take away resources from somebody. Just make sure you don't hit somebody who's playing a Reanimator style deck. Reach Through Depths, Reach Through Mists. This is the only one of the very few just cantrips for cantrip's sake. Think twice. This one's in there because you can use it twice. You can flash it back so you actually can get 2 cards out of the same card. Anticipate. This is to help you dig. Since I didn't have brainstorms, which I wish I could find, but I did not find any, this was my replacement, because essentially it's kind of the same thing. It lets you dig through 3 cards and then keep 1. So it was the closest I could find. Peer through depths. Most, I'd have to say about 35% of the deck is an instant or sorcery. Maybe more. Could be a little more. But this lets you look at the top 5 cards of your library and reveal an instant or sorcery and put it in your hand and put the rest into your on the bottom of your library. Now, keep in mind this is not a draw, so it does not actually trigger NIv-Mizzet. So just keep that in mind. This is to help you find the card to help you trigger them. Radical idea, I added this because of the jumpstart. It essentially can let you draw 2 cards, and it'll help you. You can recast it by discarding a card, and with the amount, you don't need that much mana or land in play, so you'll probably just end up ditching a land for this for the jump start. I found this in the collection and decided this would be helpful. It is Borrowing 100,000 Arrows. The name is horrible, but the effect is pretty good. It's 3 to cast sorcery. It says draw a card for each tapped creature target opponent controls. This is especially good against like massive token decks or aggro decks, specifically in the token arena, just because most people who play tokens in Commander make a lot of tokens and they do a lot of aggressive attacking. So you can actually draw probably 10 to 15 cards off this if the scenario is correct. So comparative analysis. Excuse me. This is in the deck for the because most likely you're going to be using the Surge part of it. So it costs 4 to draw 2. However, for the most part, with all your cantrips, you're probably going to be spending 4 mana to draw 3 cards, because you'll probably have cantripped before it, or you may have cantripped into it. So keep that in mind. Inspiration. Again, same thing as comparative analysis, but without the Surge, just because I needed stuff to put in there to draw cards. So inspiration get you 2. Deep analysis. Similar to the inspiration, only the flashback is where it's important. If you're facing against somebody who mills cards for some reason, you still at least get an opportunity to use this card. Or if you've gotten to cast it, you get to use it again, so it can net you 4 total cards. Hieroglyphic Illumination. Early game, if you need specifically to draw a card, you can cycle it for 1, or you can pay the casting cost and draw 2. I've actually used this card in like my arena, or my duels, sorry, my MTG duels, and I've actually used the cycling more often than I actually used the casting cost for the draw 2, just because early game it helps you get ahead. Chemist's Insight, and as you saw, there's a lot of ones that are like the 4 to cast draw 2 cards, because this is more about drawing getting to your answers. But this one has the jump start. Again, you get to cast it twice, so it's kind of handy to be able to do it more than once. We're in red, so of course we're going to do things like the looting stuff. So Faithless Looting went in. While you don't want to be discarding too many different cards that are useful, this is helpful for when you have you had too many lands, or you're drawing into too many lands. It helps you get to the actual answers and get around any extra lands that you don't want to do. And there's a couple of these. I got the Faithless Looting, a Tormenting Voice, which does essentially the same style of thing. You discard a card and you draw 2. So again, we're drawing cards. Wild Guess, same thing as the Faithless Looting, only it's 2 red instead of 1 red and 1 of any. Browbeat. A lot of people don't like the Punisher cards, is what these are called. I think it's great, because for this deck, you get the benefit either way. You either get to draw 3 cards or deal 5 damage. Now, in Commander, 5 damage doesn't seem like a whole lot, but if you've got a good state on the board, 5 damage could be the difference between a player losing or winning. So it's a damned if you do, damned if you don't kind of card when it comes to this deck, because Either the damage is going to kill them or the draw is going to kill them. So I went with that. And then its new, older, more beefier brother, Risk Factor. It's kind of the same thing as Browbeat, but a little bit better. So this one, instead of doing 3, instead of dealing 5 damage and drawing 3, it deals 4 damage or you draw 3, but it has Jumpstart, meaning that you can do it again. So if they let you draw the cards, you can jumpstart it if you have any extra lands that you draw. So it's pretty interesting. And then I went with the granddaddy of all drawing cards in the game. All card draw in the game in Commander. I know a lot of people hate this card. It's a bastard. I get it. But if you're going to put one in, you put in the best. And this is one of the best cards in this game for Commander that you can play to draw cards. So I had it in the collection. I was shocked I had it in the collection. I put it in here. So that's the card draw. Now, what are you going to do while you're casting all those instant sorceries? I went ahead and put in a small little batch of cards that benefit you for that. So the first one was Firebrand Archer. Whenever you cast a non-creature spell, so that includes your artifacts, your enchantments, your planeswalkers, everything that's not a creature, and your instants and sorceries, naturally. Whenever you do, deal 1 damage to each opponent. Now, if we haven't gotten our combo out completely, this helps to put some damage onto your opponent so that you can, if you do get it out, and you didn't find, say, the Jace or the Laboratory Maniac, and you need to do the kill with damage, at least in this instance with a card like this, you can deal the damage to them just like the Psychosis Crawler. So, there's that. Next card was Electrostatic Field. It's the same principle as the Firebrand Archer, but it has a 4 defense, meaning that it can live a little bit more, whereas the Firebrand Archer had a 1 defense. And again, it says whenever you cast an instant or sorcery instead of just a non-creature spell. So we have enough instants and sorceries to do this with. It deals the damage to each opponent. The key word for all these cards was each opponent. This is going to piss everybody off, but the whole point of it is to win, so scroll. Thermal Alchemist, same thing, only a little different. Where it doesn't just do it, it requires a tap to do it. At least you get to untap every time you cast an instant or sorcery. And again, Defender with an 0/3. The reason for these cards was 2 effects. 2 different reasons for them was the higher defense to block, say, incoming attacks from aggro decks that are using, 2/1s or 1/1s that are just trying to ping you to death with their little army. It was to help alleviate some of the damage so you could get a little bit more time. Young Pyromancer is the king of token makers when it comes to an Izzet deck. So the reason for Young Pyromancer was you need defense at least a little bit, because if you don't have any creatures, you're not going to survive. You're going to just be the target of everybody on the board. This is to help alleviate some of that pressure. If you can get a Young Pyromancer down on the second turn, I know, 99 cards you got to go through to get it. But if you do happen to get it, every cantrip you cast, not only does it let you draw a card, but lets you put a 1/1 in play as well. So, Young Pyromancer's in here for that. The next card is Guttersnipe. It's essentially like the Firebrand Archer and the Thermal Alchemist, only he's a little bit better because he deals 2 damage to each opponent. So, in essence, if you can find a way in this deck, and trust me, you can, believe me, you can, find a way to draw 20 cards with this out, you can basically just win the game. Assuming you're not playing against like an Alluro deck or any kind of life gain deck. So I went with Guttersnipe for that. Alright, now I didn't want to put this in the deck for a couple of reasons. One of them was a personal reason. I only opened a few of these when I opened up my War of the Spark, and I myself want to play with this card. But I figured the deck needed it, so I sacrificed my own once for my customer. This is Saheeli, Sublime Artificer. 3 to cast, comes into play as a Planeswalker with 5 loyalty. That's a pretty good loyalty for 3. She doesn't have an uptick, but you don't really need to use her downtick whenever you cast a non-creature spell. So we're going back to that. That's artifacts, instants, sorceries, enchantments, other Planeswalkers. Whenever you cast a non-creature spell, create a 1/1 servo token. So, same thing as the Young Pyromancer. We need things to be able to block for us that you don't really care about. You don't want to be using your resources to cast creatures that are just going to sit there and die. Saheeli kind of alleviates that along with the Young Pyromancer, so that while you're casting your other stuff to find your combo, you're putting other things out in play for free so that you can have a defense. So, now, I don't really think that you're going to use her actual ability, her down tick at all, but if you find a combo in there somewhere, I would use it. Tunneling GOP. Now this one's a little different. This one has Landfall, and Landfall is one of my favorite abilities in the game. So for something you're already doing, which is putting land into play, whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, it deals 1 damage to each opponent. If you haven't noticed the theme here, you're trying to get damage out to everybody in any way possible. And the redundancy factor here is that you have different ways to do it with so many different cards that you can actually accomplish this easily. So that was the reason. Murmuring Mystic is, again, a Saheeli Sublime Artificer or a Young Pyromancer style card. It was for redundancy. Again, a big ass, 1/5. Whenever you cast instant sorcery, put a 1/1 blue illusion creature with flying into play. The reason why this is in there is obviously for the redundancy for, Young Pyromancer or Saheeli, but the importance of this card is that they have flying. Remember, in Commander, flying is more prevalent than in regular 60-card Magic, just because you have a little bit more time to put out the bigger creatures, and most creatures that have flying cost a little bit more than don't. So that's what Murmuring Mystic is for. All right. Now, for defense, other than the stuff that helps you make little 1/1 tokens, I have a different setup for defense. So we're going to start off with a Meekstone. So it's 1/2 cast, and that's important because this can drop down first, so people won't be able to untap their creatures. It'll make you a target, I get it, but it's to help slow the process of you getting beat down with creatures so you can get to your combo. So I put a Meekstone in there for that. Rapid Hybridization is probably one of the better blue cards as far as creature removal. It's spot removal. It helps so that you can get, say, not a lot of people play 1 or 2 to cast commanders, but if they do, most of them are a problem. What comes to mind is the green elf that's 1 to cast that can put out tokens like you wouldn't believe. You want to make it so that they have that commander tax of having to pay more for it to come out later. Yeah, it leaves a 3/3 green frog behind, but I'd rather deal with a 3/3 than a commander any day of the week. So that's in there. Turn to Frog. Again, it's for commanders. It makes them lose all of their abilities and become a 1/1. You can use this in many different ways. You can use it in response to them doing something. You can use it when a wrath effect or an effect that deals damage to all creatures comes out. This takes away all abilities. That includes Indestructible, by the way. So if they're using something that has Indestructible, you can take that away. Same thing with the Kasmina's Transmutation, only this time, instead of it being an instant, it's an enchantment, meaning that they lose all abilities and have base power and toughness 1/1 until it dies, or until the enchantment dies. This kind of nullifies an entire, strategy on your opponent's side. It makes it so that they can't do what their commander does. For a little bit of control, I didn't put a whole lot of counter magic in, even though it's a blue deck. I put in the bare basics. Counterspell and negate. So, in case you need to counter that one thing that would kill you, you counter it. Simple as that. I put in Turn and Burn. More commander control. So target creature again loses all abilities and becomes an 0/1 weird. And then the burn part is deals 2 damage to target creature or player. Usually you use this as a fused card so you can get rid of a commander. I haven't really seen where I would use the burn side without the turn part. For defense, more defense, Fog Bank, only because it's a cheap to cast a flyer. It's only for strictly defense because it doesn't take combat damage. So even if they're attacking with a big ass 10-10, doesn't matter what it is, you stop it. And the same thing with the Guard Gomazoa. Only it's a little bit bigger. Instead of an 0-2, it's a 1-3. And again, it has flying. Both of them have flying. So you can stop other opposing creatures that have flying without having to worry about it. Alright, now, you want to be able to wipe a lot of the creatures off the board. One of the small caveats to being blue-red is you don't have any wrath effects for real. I have included some quasi-wrath effects, if you will. The first one being a Pyroclasm. It deals 2 damage to each creature. Yes, it kills your own creatures, but it also helps kill your opponent's creatures, especially if you're going up against a Field of the Dead style deck or a token deck. It can wipe most of them off the board. I have many variations of it. This one is Breath of Daragaz. This is one of my favorites as far as these go. It looks very unassuming. It's 2 to cast. It deals 1 damage to each creature without flying in each player. However, if you kick it, it turns into 4 damage. And I believe the statistic is that I think it was 76% of all creatures have a toughness less than 4. So it's pretty helpful. Fiery Cannonade, basically it is a poor man's Pyroclasm. If I was playing Pirate Tribal for some reason, it would be a benefit to me. It's not. It's just a Pyroclasm for a little bit more. I do believe, actually, the Pyroclasm is a sorcery, and the Fiery Cannonade, though, is an instant. So that's the one bonus for it being 1 extra mana. Slagstorm, same thing as a Pyroclasm, only it deals 3 damage to each creature. However, you can actually make it deal 3 damage to each player instead if you just need to kill a couple people. Sizzle, this was the one questionable inclusion I have in here. This is one of those ones where you can take it out and upgrade it to something else. I'm sure there are other things out there that I didn't have access to, but it deals 3 damage to each opponent. My other quasi-wrath effect was Breaking Point, another Punisher card. For the most part, I have a feeling that most opponents are going to choose the 6 damage, but if they're low on life and they can't, they got to go with the Destroy All Creatures. So it was my only thing I could find that was a wrath effect, and it's still even just a quasi-wrath effect. Web of Inertia, this is more to annoy your opponent so that they just don't attack you. And the bonus is that if they don't have anything in their graveyard because somebody bazooka bogged it or blew it up in other ways, they have no option. It says at the beginning of each opponent's combat phase, that player may remove a card from his or her graveyard from the game, so exile a card from their graveyard. If they don't, they can't attack you. So, early game, pretty good. Most people don't have a whole lot in their graveyard, if anything at all. So that means that early game, you can't be the one that's attacked. They have to pay the tax. Propaganda, each turn, each creature cannot attack you unless its controller pays an additional 2. Again, early game, most people can't afford to do so because they're too busy casting stuff, so they cannot attack you. This is all in an effort to keep it so that you stay alive so you can get your combo out. Aetherize, it's return all attacking creatures to their owner's hand. Obviously, you only use that if they're attacking you or if it's politics. You can play political on this one, and if you want to keep somebody else in the game, you can do it for and help out one of your opponents. For the most part, I would say use it for yourself, but I'm not playing that game, so you may have a reason to use it otherwise. And then more defense by putting out things. Remember, guys, we're playing a lot of instants and sorceries. We're doing a lot of cantrips. Late game, you could end up putting out 21 ones. So that's another part of the strategy. When you're doing cantripping and you're casting all this stuff, this can actually turn into a win condition. Not likely, but it can happen. Alright, so that's the defense and some utility. Alright, now the actual utility cards. These are cards that are here just to help you deal with your opponents in other ways. I found this in the collection. Destroy target non-creature artifacts with casting costs equal to X. It is a creature. It's not an instant. It's not a sorcery. It stays in play. It's a heavy cost of double X1, but if somebody has out, say, I'll use the example that I have in the deck, the Meekstone. If for some reason you need the Meekstone off, which you wouldn't, but if your opponent has something equivalent to that and it's only 1 or 2 to cast, there are things out there like dampening spheres and stuff like that that make it so that your spells cost more. Well, that's what he's for. He is literally one of the better options for getting rid of artifacts, non-creature ones anyway, when it comes to Commander. So I put him in there for that. We're drawing a lot, so you don't want to discard things, or you don't want to have to discard down to 7 because you've drawn too many cards and you didn't get to your answer. That's where Library of Land comes in. This provides 2 benefits for you. You skip your discard phase. In essence, what this card really reads as far as the rules go is that you have no maximum hand size. So it doesn't matter how many cards you draw, you're not restricted to 7 cards being your max. The added bonus of this card is that whenever you're forced to discard a card, you can put it on top of your library. So rather than losing resources through discard or another means, so I will let you know this. I actually play Nekusar. This card right here has to be removed before Nekusar actually works. If somebody plays a wheel effect on you, if you don't feel like getting rid of the cards in your hand, you can just discard them to the top of your library and draw them. Say a Wheel of Fortune or, any of the ilk that are like Wheel of Fortune, you can actually just redraw your same hand. So it's kind of a helpful thing in 2 ways. It helps you so that you don't lose stuff from discard. It also helps you so you don't have a maximum hand size. So I included that in there. Electromancer is just quintessential, is it? Makes all your instants and sorceries cheaper. So we go with that. He's also a 2/2 body in case for some reason you need to block with him. For a little bit of ramp, I didn't put a whole lot of ramp in here because I figured between all the card drawing and all the other fuckery going on, you shouldn't need too much mana ramp. So the little bit I did put in here was a Burnished Heart, because you can sacrifice him to get 2 basic land cards and put them on the battlefield tapped. I've actually fishbowled this deck a bunch, and this came up 4 or 5 times, and it actually seems pretty efficient because the draw of it is that you get them out on 3rd turn if you have 3 lands. You play your 4th land on the 4th turn, and then you sacrifice him. You get your 6 lands, and oh, lo and behold, look at NIv-Mizzet's casting cost right there. It's 6. So it is something that can happen. I have done it 2 or 3 times, fishbowling specifically that way, but he is pretty good. Primal Amulet, another cost reducer for your instants and sorceries. So you saw all those 4 to cast draw 2s. Now they become 2 to cast draw 2s. So you're 1 for 1ing as far as cantrips go. This card has an added bonus though. So it reduces the cost, but every time you cast an instant sorcery, you can put a counter on it, and then you can transform it. And I'll show you why I chose this. On the transform side, you can add a mana of any color to your mana pool, and then when that mana is used to cast an instant sorcery, copy it. So now you're not just casting 1 spell, you're casting 2 spells. So it helps with Empty the Warrens if you have this out and you use it to cast it, and you have a whole bunch of spells on the stat are already cast for the turn. You get a pretty good benefit out of that. So now I needed to find a way. This was a late addition to the deck. I needed to find a way to consistently help keep finding the combo pieces. After going through all my stuff, I found that red and blue, aside from making you lose the game, doesn't really tutor very well when it comes to finding enchantments. However, Ring of 3 Wishes does. So it has 3 counters on it, and you remove a wish counter from it, and you search your library for a card. It's essentially, it's a diabolic tutor instead of a demonic because it's a little bit more heavy on the casting cost, but it's 3. I know that recently in Throne of Eldraine, they made something that's kind of like this, only, it's black. So it's out of the color scheme that we have going on here, so I couldn't really include that. So this was my answer to that. And then every Izzet deck has to have a Izzet Paragon. Now, if for some reason your playgroup catches on to you and decides that you have to go first or be dead first if you keep playing NIv-Mizzet, you can actually switch it up and make this your commander instead, which makes you less of a target, but still just as effective, especially because, you know, you get to look at the top card of your library at all times, and then if it's an instant or sorcery, cast it and copy it. So it has the same effect of NIv-Mizzet where you get some combo to go off. However, you need to be able to get to the combo a little bit quicker if you use him as your commander. I wouldn't suggest using him as your commander, but if your playgroup is tired of you playing NIv-Mizzet, it's an option. So, now, we have our lands. Now remember, guys, this was on a budget. So you won't see fetches, you won't see revised dual lands, you won't see any of that. This is how I had to make it for budget purposes. Reliquary Tower. It's the same thing as Library of Lang. You kind of need it. Your hope is to get this late game when you're doing all the drawing so you don't have to discard your hand. So instead of the fetches, I went with more of a cycling theme. So if it's late game and you're drawing cards you don't need, essentially these are cantrips. So I put in the Forgotten Cave and the Lonely Sandbar. That's to help you dig, dig, dig. The whole point of this deck is to dig, dig, dig. The other option for cycling was Desert of the Fervent and, of course, Desert of the Mindful. There only, I believe, is one more set of lands that actually cycle. I could not find them. I believe the blue one is called Remote Isle. I could not find them, so I did not include them. Well, no real dual lands, but we have some dual lands. Yes, these are the comes into play tapped ones, but at least they're dual lands. This one at least gives you a life. It's always helpful, but it's only one life. A Guild Gate, again, comes into play tapped. Now, we don't have all things that come into play tapped. I did include a Sulfur Falls because I had them. And then I did also include, I found an extra Steam Vents. So, while it's not a true duel, it's still a shock land. So, you got at least two of them. And of course, no commander deck that's more than one color is complete without a command tower. That is your quintessential dual land. So, that is the NIv-Mizzet Parun commander deck. Given a budget, given the restraints that I had, that is how you play this deck, and that is the strategy for it.